p.m. Ignite passion and motivation.
The most difficult thing in business is first getting yourself to thinking and then getting others to thinking. A person may keep very busy indeed without doing any thinking at all. And the easy course is to keep so busy there will be no time left over for thought. We try to substitute discussion for thought by organizing committees, but a committee is just an elaborate means of fooling oneself into believing that talking is the same as thinking. These words are from Harvey S. Firestone's autobiography, Men and Rubber, one of the books that I give away the most frequently as a gift. While it was written in 1926, everyone I give it to is surprised not only by the density of wisdom, but by how relevant it remains today. Welcome to The Knowledge Project. I'm your host, Shane Parrish. In a world where knowledge is power, this podcast is your toolkit for mastering the best of what other people have already figured out. In 1920, Harvey Firestone returned from vacation to find his company drowning in $43 million of debt. His executives were paralyzed. The banks had cut him off. Competitors were circling. Yet, instead of panicking, Firestone did something that shocked everyone. He slashed prices by 25% and personally took control of sales. The situation did not frighten me, he later wrote. It put new life into me. That crisis revealed the principles that separated Firestone from every other businessman of his era. And they're the same principles that separate outliers from everyone else today. While others built elaborate organizations, Firestone asked two simple questions that cut through every problem. Is it necessary? And can it be simplified? While others chased trends, he focused relentlessly on what wouldn't change. While others avoided hard decisions, he had the courage to close doors and burn boats. Most importantly, Firestone understood something that eludes most ambitious professionals today. Positioning beats talent, simplicity scales better than complexity, and the person with options holds all the power. Today's episode isn't about tires. It's about the durable, asymmetric advantages that create lasting success in any field. Whether you're navigating technological disruption, fighting entrenched competitors, or building something from nothing, Firestone's principles will give you an unfair advantage. As he put it, thought, not money, is the real business capital. Let's examine how he built an empire by thinking differently. It's time to listen and learn. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only. Harvey Firestone learned his most valuable business lessons not from formal education, but from his father, Benjamin, a man he would later call the best businessman I have ever known. What made Benjamin exceptional wasn't flashy success or quick profits, but a deeper understanding of what creates lasting value. The test of a businessman is not whether he can make money in 1 or 2 boom years or can make money throughout one lifetime, but whether he creates something that will live and grow in money-making power after he is gone. By this standard, Benjamin excelled through 3 principles that would later define Harvey's own approach to building an empire. The first principle was maintaining a surplus, or how I prefer to frame it as a margin of safety. Harvey wrote that his father had the rare foresight to know that a fine crop one year was more or less a fortunate accident and did not set a figure to be followed during future years. Consequently, he always had plenty of stock and feed on hand. This wasn't just prudent farming, it was positioning. Benjamin was never a forced seller when other farmers rushed to market and sold regardless of price because they needed the money so badly he could wait. Sometimes an entire year for better prices. Having a surplus is the greatest aid to business judgment that I know, Harvey later reflected, and I bitterly know what I'm talking about, for I went through years of upbuilding without being able to accumulate a surplus. The key lesson here is that if you are well positioned, be it with a surplus or margin of safety or whatever you want to call it, you control your own circumstances. When you don't have that, you are controlled by them. The second principle was patience in negotiation. At market, Benjamin would silently survey the options, watching and listening, and gathering as much information as possible before deciding, often walking away if conditions weren't favorable. Never rush in on a deal, he advised. Let it come to you. This discipline meant Harvey couldn't recall his father ever making a significant mistake. Third, and perhaps most valuable, was Benjamin's reputation for fairness. He never wanted to get more than his stock was worth or to buy stock for less than it was worth, Harvey wrote. The result? Other farmers wouldn't sell until Benjamin did. Buyers sought him out, first knowing whatever price he accepted would set the market. His reputation had become a competitive advantage. While other farmers remained narrowly focused on daily operations, Benjamin also maintained perspective through voracious reading, rare for farmers of that era. As Harvey noted, when all a person's attention is required by the daily running of his business, he seldom sees the business in perspective. He misses the new developments. Young Harvey absorbed these lessons while developing his own passion for trading horses. By 15, he could evaluate a horse's quality and value with remarkable precision, skills that would transfer surprisingly well to his future in the tire industry, where quality assessment and value creation were similarly crucial. The lessons here are deceptively simple but incredibly powerful. Good positioning eliminates forced decisions. You don't need to be smarter than others to outperform them if you're better positioned. Anyone looks like a genius when they're in a good position, and even the smartest person looks like an idiot when they're in a bad one. Working in your business also differs from working on it. One requires execution, the other perspective. And finally, fairness compounds. Of the 4 possible relationship outcomes with anyone in your life, win-win, win-lose, lose-win, lose-lose, only win-win builds lasting success. After leaving the farm, Harvey's brief stint as a bookkeeper led to his first real business venture with a man named Jackson, selling flavoring extracts and patent medicines. This disaster would teach him more about business fundamentals than any success could have. Jackson's business model was based on a misunderstanding of cause and effect. He had observed a friend named August Green grow wealthy selling a dubious cure-all called Green's August Flour, which succeeded through aggressive advertising. Jackson believed he could replicate this success, but skipped the advertising costs by hiring charismatic salesmen. Among these star salesmen was a character Harvey vividly remembered, a big, fine fellow with a genial presence and the gift of gab, one of these men who could sell anything. He had just one formula. He just breezed in on a prospect, offered him a cigar, and then sat down and talked him to death. That was salesmanship in those days. Harvey joined as a junior salesman at $50 monthly. Not for any sales expertise, but because he had helped with the business plan. His romanticized version of the traveling salesman's life quickly collided with reality when his first territory was tiny Apple Creek, Ohio. His first day proved humbling. After nervously circling the town a few times, Harvey struck out at several small shops before reluctantly trying his hand at the largest shop, thinking it was the least likely to hear him out. And surprisingly, it was at this shop that he made his first sale. This pattern taught him a crucial insight. The owners of truly successful businesses recognize and prioritize genuine opportunities, while those struggling often claim to be too busy for new ideas. But the business was on borrowed time, and the more profound lesson emerged as it unraveled. The star salesman focused on high-margin patent medicines, while Harvey, lacking confidence, sold humble vanilla extract. Unexpectedly, his vanilla sales became the company's main revenue source. As Harvey later explained, patent medicines do not sell on merit, for there's precious little merit in most of them. Patent medicines sell only on their reputation for curing diseases, and that reputation has to be built up by advertising. People have to be made to believe that the medicines do good. Meanwhile, the extracts did not need to be advertised because people do not have to be educated into the belief that vanilla extract will give them a vanilla flavor, whereas they do have to be educated or fooled into the belief that a spring tonic will cure spring ills. Within 6 months, all the star salesmen quit. Jackson went broke, and Harvey lost his job. But he gained something more valuable than money, understanding that the relationship between product quality, marketing, and sales. More importantly, he witnessed firsthand how easily businesses confuse correlation with causation. The star salesmen had succeeded earlier in their careers not because of their sales techniques, but because they'd sold products with established reputations. They mistook correlation, their sales alongside advertising, for causation, their personal ability to persuade. Harvey would later write, "The first principle of salesmanship is that you must thoroughly believe in what you have to sell. Then selling becomes merely a matter of showing how your product will help a prospect. Great products either sell themselves through obvious utility or require the right marketing to educate customers about their value." This lesson would serve Harvey throughout his career and remains equally relevant today. After his sales venture collapsed, Harvey swallowed his pride and joined his uncle's buggy company, a position he'd previously rejected. For the first time, he earned enough to pursue his passion for horses as a side business, buying and selling them at a profit. But technological disruption was coming for the carriage industry. Harvey's company sold premium buggies for $110. They were built to last decades. However, competitors began offering solid $35 alternatives that farmers found perfectly adequate. Customers increasingly preferred replacing cheaper vehicles every few years rather than investing in premium durability. The value proposition that seemed obviously superior to industry insiders, longer lasting quality, turned out to matter less and less to consumers than price. The company soon entered receivership, and Harvey found himself unemployed again, but this time with a wife and home to support. The pressure was relentless, yet these consecutive failures gave Harvey invaluable business education. He was learning Jackson's extract company had failed through poor marketing, misaligned incentives, and product market misunderstanding. His uncle's buggy company collapsed by clinging to outdated value propositions while the market evolved beneath them. Harvey was learning business fundamentals through observing failures up close, paying with time rather than capital, and it would become an education more valuable than any he could have purchased. These early failures weren't just teaching Harvey about business, they were preparing his mind to spot opportunity where others saw only crisis. And that opportunity would arrive in an unexpected form, right beneath the wheels of his own buggy. One afternoon in Detroit, everything changed. Looking down at the wheels of his own carriage, Harvey found the insight that would define his future. He wrote, "Driving out one afternoon in my rubber-tired buggy, it for the first time struck me that my future was right on the wheels of my buggy. Those rubber tires were the only ones in Detroit. They were not the only ones in the United States, and a London cab company had already fitted out all of its cabs with rubber tires. But they were hard to buy in the United States. Why not make them easy to buy?" This was classic opportunity recognition, identifying a gap between what people wanted and what was readily available. Rubber tires transformed the riding experience, replacing bone-jarring wooden wheels and metal rims with smooth comfort. Harvey had experienced this himself and recognized a fundamental truth about product adoption. Once a man rode on rubber tires, he wanted a set. This insight mirrors what Estee Lauder would later build an entire empire around. I think we talk about this in episode 218. The power of direct experience. Lauder insisted on personally applying her cosmetics to customers, knowing firsthand experience would convert them instantly. Harvey understood that rubber tires sold themselves after just one ride, and a carefully selected partner quickly estimated the market potential during a single dinner conversation. If they could capture just half the buggy market in America, they calculated they'd rival Standard Oil in size. That night, they caught a train to Chicago and within days purchased a small rubber factory for $1,500 cash. Their business model was straightforward. Buy rubber strips, cut and fit them to carriage wheels, and charge $40 for sets that cost $14 to produce, a healthy 65% gross margin. But they immediately confronted the entrepreneur's classic dilemma, success creating its own problems. Their growth outpaced their financial resources, creating a dangerous mismatch between opportunity and capability. As Harvey candidly explained, we were growing faster than our capital, which meant that we were always short of money. Their promising venture now faced the constraint that kills more startups than any other, running out of cash while running towards success. While Harvey mastered production quickly, the financial side of his growing business revealed his inexperience. As he candidly admitted, their complexity was not due to the size of operations. I could state our condition in those days right out of my head, and the back of an envelope gave ample space for the statement. Our trouble was that we did not have enough money and did not know how to get it. The elephant in the room for any growing business appeared: cash constraints meeting opportunity. When the Imperial Rubber Company offered to sell their entire operation for $15,000, which was a bargain too good to ignore, Harvey faced a moment of truth. He needed outside capital, therefore he would need to learn banking. His first bank meeting became a masterclass in humiliation. Harvey arrived with enthusiasm and projections, mistaking the banker's polite interest for genuine excitement. The banker nodded and asked questions and gave every indication of impending approval. He was just giving me the opportunity to show how little I knew about finance. He was not frank about it. I left the bank thinking I was going to get a loan, and while I was never refused the loan, I never got it. Picture Harvey in that moment, walking out confident, expecting imminent funds, unaware he'd just revealed every gap in his financial knowledge. But failure teaches what success can't. From this embarrassment, Harvey extracted lessons about financial communication that still serve entrepreneurs a century later. What I learned was that a bank statement ought never to be in such shape that it has to be explained. Everything ought to be on the statement. A statement of condition can be a prospectus. In fact, it is the best possible kind of prospectus, but it ought not to be prepared in enthusiasm. Undeterred, Harvey approached a larger institution, First National Bank. This critical moment came when he met Frank O. Wetmore, a young loan officer who saw beyond Harvey's inexperience to his potential. Rather than rejecting him, Wetmore offered what Harvey called a course in practical banking, teaching him about the proper financial ratios and management. Then, remarkably, Wetmore lent him $10,000. The lesson here is bounce, don't break. The first no is rarely the end of the line. Learn, adapt, and try again. Harvey's relationship with Wetmore evolved from lender to mentor, transforming both the business and Harvey himself. The connection proved so valuable that even after becoming an industrial titan, Harvey continued seeking Wetmore's counsel whenever he was in Chicago. With financing secured, they purchased the factory, but a competitive threat immediately emerged. A rival company introduced a purpose-built wheel for rubber tires that made Harvey's retrofitting method look primitive by comparison. Harvey faced the classic entrepreneur's dilemma: fight a technically superior competitor or find another path. Rather than battling uphill, he pursued a counterintuitive strategy, proposing a merger to his competitor with a simple, powerful argument. If the two of us kept in the field, neither would make any money. The consolidation succeeded. Therefore, they became the dominant player in Chicago's buggy tire market. This market position attracted the attention of Consolidated Company, a trust actively acquiring rubber businesses nationwide. After careful negotiation, Harvey and his partners sold for $1,254,000, an amount Harvey described as something more than 4 times what our business was worth, not counting its goodwill. His personal share came to $45,000 in cash, considerably more money than I had thought was in the world for me. Picture Harvey in this moment, the farm boy who weathered multiple failures, now holding more cash than he'd imagined ever possible. Most people would have considered this the happy ending, goal achieved, financial security obtained, but Harvey wasn't most people. In fact, he was just getting started. With characteristic prudence, he invested $20,000 in a mortgage for steady income and kept $25,000 liquid for his next venture. In just 4 years, a $1,000 investment had grown 45-fold. Though the acquiring company offered him a position, Harvey soon resigned. As he put it, "I wanted to be out for myself." The wealth hadn't changed, his fundamental desire for independence and the chance to build something truly his own. With newfound wealth in hand, Harvey faced the classic entrepreneur's question: what's next? The carriage industry held little appeal for his uncle's business collapsed. "I had no hankering after the carriage business," he wrote, "for it to become one of keen competition in cheap models. But what about the emerging automobile industry?" Surprisingly, Harvey didn't see gasoline-powered cars as the obvious future. The few automobiles on the American roads seemed like expensive curiosities, not exactly toys, but certainly not commercial products. Of course, that's how all innovation starts. Just look at AI today. It really went mainstream with DALL-E, and all you could do is make these silly little images, and people laughed. And now, just a few years later, it's taking over jobs. Harvey, like many of us, was so focused on the present that he'd walked past the automotive history being made without recognizing it. He later admitted, "I do not recall ever seeing Henry Ford's car about the streets of Detroit, and I have no recollection of having seen Mr. Ford, although probably we passed many times on the street, for the Detroit Edison company where he worked was close to my Detroit office. Instead, Harvey believed electric vehicles would dominate, noting, I had sold many tires to the Woods Motor Vehicle Company in Chicago, which was one of the first companies to get out an electric carriage. We all thought of electricity as the coming motive power for everything. The man who would later partner with Henry Ford was betting on the wrong technology, but amid this uncertainty, Harvey made a profound insight that would define his success. Rather than betting on which transportation technology would win, he bet on what wouldn't change. I believe thoroughly in rubber tires, he wrote. They made riding so much easier that they appeared to me to be a necessity. While working briefly for a Chicago tire company, Harvey grew dissatisfied with their pricing policies. Therefore, he resigned and attempted to start his own venture. When disagreements with bankers over factory locations derailed his plan, Harvey redirected to Akron, Ohio, the established center of America's rubber industry. There, after managing a tire department for another company, Harvey encountered the invention that would transform his trajectory and the future of American transportation. In Akron, Harvey encountered an invention that addressed the tire industry's fundamental challenge. James Swinehart, a former school teacher turned carpenter, had developed an innovative fastening method that solved a persistent problem. The prime difficulty in the whole tire trade was fastening the tires to the rims, Harvey explained. The clincher principle was popular for a time, but it was not entirely satisfactory. Swinehart's solution used cross wires embedded in the tire base, secured with retaining wires. A simple but elegant fix that worked particularly well for larger tires where other approaches failed completely. On July 26, 1900, Harvey and Swinehart struck a deal. They would launch with $50,000 in capital, Harvey investing $10,000 cash plus a business option valued at $15,000, while Swinehart contributed $10,000 and his patent. The Firestone Tire and Rubber Company was born. Harvey became treasurer and general manager rather than president, explaining, I have never cared much about titles. It did not bother me who had the title so long as I ran the company. This focus on substance over status would define his leadership style. The established Akron rubber companies barely noticed this upstart, but their indifference created opportunity. For 2 years, Firestone operated as a middleman, buying tires from established manufacturers and adding their patented fastening device. Sales grew rapidly, but profits remained elusive. Losing money is not pleasant, but every business must at times lose money. Losing money is really serious if you do not know why you are losing, or if you do know why and cannot help yourself. It was very plain to me why we were losing money. We were losing money because we couldn't control the cost of our tires, Harvey realized. They had the best fastening device, but couldn't price competitively while buying tires from the very companies they competed against. The solution was clear but daunting: vertical integration. They needed their own manufacturing facility, therefore they needed more capital again. Harvey knew this fundraising round would determine their fate. Instead of approaching many small investors, he targeted Will Christie, the most influential man in Akron, applying a principle he'd refined through experience. A great many salesmen make the mistake of thinking that pestering a man is the same as selling him, and they get their prospects into such a state of exasperation that they would not buy a gold dollar from them at 50% off. Just getting to a man is not enough. It is when and how you get to him. Harvey tracked Christie's vacation plans, boarded a train to California, checked into the same hotel, and then, quite accidentally, bumped into him at breakfast. The staged coincidence worked perfectly. By the meal's end, Harvey had secured $10,000 in investment, which eventually grew to $50,000 with Christie becoming company president. With funding secured, Harvey found an abandoned foundry and furnished it frugally. We bought everything at the secondhand price. You might almost say that we furnished the factory with junk, but it was junk which, with repairs, served our purpose very well. Harvey embodied the hands-on founder, simultaneously serving as factory superintendent, office manager, and head of sales. By 1903, sales reached $230,000, more than double their previous year. But the 5-second moment that validated their strategy came with the balance sheet, their first ever profit of $8,503. Despite this long-awaited success, Harvey refused to declare dividends, choosing instead to reinforce their financial position. We wanted to save as much as possible for a still further enlargement of the factory. The lesson here is instructive. While many companies would have taken the surplus and declared a dividend, Harvey wanted to position the company for the future. The cycle of financial discipline begun on Benjamin Firestone's farm was now powering the early stages of what would become an industrial empire. Success brought its own challenges. As manufacturers rather than resellers, they faced hostility from established rubber companies who had once welcomed them as customers, but now viewed them as direct competitors. Harvey confronted a classic business dilemma. Will you cut your quality, reduce prices, and meet competition, or will you try to sell at your present price? Either obvious approach meant certain failure. Lower prices would erase their hard-won profitability, but they lacked the scale economies to compete at the same price point as industry giants. They needed a third option. Therefore, innovation became their only path forward. Harvey understood a fundamental business truth. There is no real profit in high prices because high prices automatically cut down volume. But the only possible way to lower prices and still keep business is to save in the cost of manufacturing by improved processes. The opportunity lurked in a problem hiding in plain sight. The carriage tire trade lacked standardization, forcing dealers to stock hundreds of tire sizes, a massive inventory burden consuming both space and capital. What if they could create a standardized product that solved this inventory nightmare? George Ludington, a Firestone employee, proposed creating tires in continuous lengths that could be cut to size as needed. The concept was elegantly simple but technically challenging. All previous attempts had failed during the rubber curing process. Rather than dismissing the idea, Harvey partnered directly with Ludington, working alongside him to solve the problem. This wasn't an executive dictating from above, but a problem solver in the trenches. The resulting roll tire transformed the industry. Dealers could serve customers with a fraction of previous inventory, and Firestone escaped the price war trap. As Harvey noted with understated pride, that invention took us completely out of competition. This focus on solving genuine problems extended beyond product innovation to customer relationships. When Cuban distributor Jose Alvarez complained about defective tires and refused payment, Harvey didn't argue by mail. He sent his representative to Havana immediately with new equipment. Kharkov, the Firestone representative, discovered the true issue: incorrectly mounted tires due to misunderstood instructions. After proper installation, Alvarez insisted on testing the tires himself. Imagine this. Alvarez hitches his best horses to a carriage with Kharkov trembling beside him, then drives wildly through Havana, turning out of car tracks at full speed and dashing around corners on two wheels like a madman. This dramatic demonstration transformed a potential disaster into a triumph. Alvarez not only paid in full, but requested an exclusive representation contract, becoming Firestone's largest single customer for years. The lesson is powerful. Solving problems at their source builds trust that advertising dollars can't buy. While the customer was wrong, Firestone sent solutions instead of arguments. The relationship became so solid that when competitors later tried selling similar tires in Cuba without a license, Alvarez reportedly had them jailed until they agreed to stop. By refusing the false choice between competing on price or premium positioning, Harvey created his own category through innovation, a strategy that would repeatedly save the company in the decades ahead. While Firestone was thriving with solid rubber tires, a technological revolution loomed ahead. Gasoline-powered automobiles required pneumatic tires, air-filled cushions that fundamentally differed from the solid tires that had built Firestone's company to date. Even worse, this new technology was controlled by an entrenched monopoly hostile to newcomers. Harvey faced the innovator's dilemma in its purest form. The numbers told a compelling story of success. 1904 sales had doubled to $460,000, while profits surged nearly ninefold to $71,000. Everything pointed to doubling down on what was working. But Harvey looked beyond the present numbers to future trends. If I read the signs correctly, solid tires would soon be a minor product. Most executives would celebrate their success and expand their profitable solid tire business. Harvey instead wrote, "No business can succeed unless it is constantly revising its product, not only to meet the actual demands of today, but also the potential demands of tomorrow." This vision triggered internal conflict so severe that one major shareholder disagreed so vehemently that Harvey bought out his stock entirely. The future belonged to pneumatic tires, therefore the company needed to adapt despite knowing nothing about manufacturing them. In addition, the vehicle tire industry operated as a closed cartel. The G&J Clincher Tire Association controlled the basic patent and ran a rigid monopoly dictating who could manufacture tires, imposing production quotas, and fixing prices across the entire industry. Each licensed manufacturer received a designated market percentage with excess profits surrendered back to the pool. As Harvey noted, if these patents held, it would have kept the motor industry in the pleasure and sporting class until the monopoly had run its course. The new age of transport would have been delayed. When Harvey approached the association for a license, they flatly refused. They didn't want another competitor diluting their shares. True to form, Harvey bounced but didn't break. He began searching for an alternative method of fastening pneumatic tires to rims that wouldn't violate the clincher patent. He discovered a crude but promising approach, essentially what would become the straight-side tire of today with rim flanges bolted together. As Harvey reflected, it is a curious coincidence that both the sidewire solid tire and the straight-side pneumatic tire proved to be the only methods for fastening on the heavy tires that were to come. But I was forced, as an outsider, into both of them. His observation contains a crucial lesson for entrepreneurs and innovators. There is always a better way of doing everything than the way which is standard at the moment. It is a good thing for a man to be pushed into finding that better way. Starting with nothing, Harvey hired a single pneumatic tire maker, tucked him into a corner of their shop, and began hand-building tires. With no automobile to test them on, he purchased one from New York and had it shipped to Ohio. There, they retrofitted the wheels with custom rims and flanges, a process filled with unanticipated obstacles. Their first road test became an exercise in perseverance. Setting out for Harvey's childhood home 60 miles away, what should have been a few hours' journey stretched into 7 hours of frustration. Every few feet, at least that is how it now seems, we had a blowout, he recalled. 7 hours of repeated failure would discourage most entrepreneurs, but Harvey spent a full year refining both tires and rims until they worked properly. Then came an even greater barrier. Every automobile in America had been fitted for clincher tires. To sell even one set of straight-side tires, Firestone would need to convince automobile owners that his product justified completely changing their vehicle's rims, dramatically increasing the price while locking them into Firestone as their only tire supplier. It was the definition of a hard sell, more expensive, riskier, and requiring commitment to an unproven product. The question hung in the air: how could a small company with a non-standard product possibly break through? Just when Firestone's vehicle tire initiative seemed destined to remain a small experiment, opportunity arrived unexpectedly. In 1905, Harvey learned that Henry Ford planned to build 2,000 cars priced at $500 each, vehicles meant for ordinary Americans, not just wealthy enthusiasts. If these cars shipped with Firestone's straight-side rims instead of clincher rims, Harvey would instantly gain 2,000 captive customers. There would be no need to convince individual owners to change their rims. They'd come equipped from the factory. Realizing this, Harvey immediately traveled to Detroit. The clincher tire monopoly had quoted Ford $70 per set. Therefore, Firestone offered $55, still enough for a healthy profit, but a significant saving for Ford's cost-sensitive manufacturing. This first meeting between these future industrial titans revealed their shared outsider status. Ford battled patents monopolizing automobile manufacturing while Firestone fought the Clincher Tire Association. Both men believed in making their products accessible to average Americans, not just the wealthy. If your tire proves to be what you think it is, then we'll use it, said Ford. But true to his meticulous nature, he insisted on 60 days of rigorous road testing before accepting. The tires passed Ford's demanding tests. Harvey got an order for 2,000 sets, a potential breakthrough moment, but elation quickly gave way to panic. His pneumatic tire department consisted of exactly one person, and they had made only a few tires. Now they needed to rapidly scale up. Harvey now faced organizing an entire production division, sourcing materials, manufacturing rims, and financing this operation overnight. He borrowed $5,000 to start, but immediately hit obstacles. The handmade rim flanges used in testing proved too expensive and weak for mass production. The local company contracted to produce them, quoted $20 per set, but couldn't meet quality standards. Harvey scrambled to find another manufacturer who could deliver superior rims at prices that preserved their profit margins. Just as production momentum built, disaster struck. After completing 300 tires, representing over $10,000 in borrowed money, Ford announced the new model would be delayed for months. With commitments for tire parts already totaling another $25,000, Firestone faced financial catastrophe. They needed cash from the initial deliveries to repay what they'd already spent. Though the company's 1905 profits reached $122,000, their rapidly expanding business demanded every dollar be reinvested. Sales had doubled to $770,000, and their workforce had grown from 12 to 130 employees. As Harvey explained with characteristic candor, our profits were book profits, not cash profits. The Ford partnership that seemed like salvation now threatened to sink the company before it could deliver a single tire. With the Ford order delayed and cash dwindling, Harvey walked the financial tightrope. He renewed notes, sold additional stock, and managed cash flow with surgical precision, all while facing skepticism from bankers who viewed automobiles as a passing novelty. Ironically, this banking skepticism proved beneficial in the long run. It is a fortunate thing for the industry that it was not favored by the bankers, Harvey reflected, else it would have been financed by bond issues, and there have been several periods when these bond issues might have been foreclosed, which would have set back the industry for a number of years. The automotive revolution would be built not on debt, but on the audacity of entrepreneurs willing to stake everything on their vision. When Ford finally began taking deliveries in 1906, the tires exceeded expectations. Large, tough, and durable. This established a partnership that would shape both companies for decades. As Harvey noted, working with Ford provided steady pressure for higher service and lower prices that prevented complacency. Anyone who does business with Mr. Ford never gets a chance to rest and enjoy honors. The pressure for better methods is continuous. Success revealed yet another challenge. Ford customers could only use Firestone's straight-side tires, but Firestone lacked nationwide distribution. People hesitated to buy cars that might not have replacement tires available when needed. Ford delivered a clear ultimatum. Firestone would need to make standard clincher tires as well. Harvey reluctantly returned to the tire monopoly, renewing his license application. The association president once again politely declined. The moment stretched into silence as Harvey considered his options. Then, with quiet determination, "If you will not give me a license, then I will go right ahead and make clincher tires without a license." And that's exactly what he did. Facing inevitable legal battle against the tire monopoly, Harvey wrote, "I was mentally, if not financially, prepared for a long fight." He took inspiration from Ford's ongoing battle against the Selden patent, a sweeping claim that essentially demanded royalties on all gasoline-powered automobiles. When the Selden Group threatened to prosecute every Ford car owner for patent violation, Ford boldly offered indemnity bonds to each customer. Hardly anyone requested them, confirming what Harvey observed. The public always roots for the underdog. Ford eventually won his case on appeal, famously testifying that George Selden has never advanced the automobile industry in a single particular, and it would perhaps be further advanced than it is now if he had never been born. For Harvey, something unexpected happened. The legal notice he braced for never arrived. The Clincher Tire Association had become distracted by another infringement case, one they ultimately lost when the courts declared their patent invalid. Their monopoly collapsed overnight, freeing the entire industry. Though, as Harvey wryly noted, another monopoly was shortly to take its place. The birth of transformative industries often follows this pattern. Pioneers create genuine innovations, then opportunists build legal barriers around them, protecting incumbents. Edison and Ford, both friends of Harvey, believed that inventors rarely benefited from patent laws. The real profits, they argued, flowed to capitalists who controlled the legal machinery. Yet inventors like James Dyson in episode 220 demonstrate why some protection remains essential. Without it, what incentive exists to invest years perfecting a breakthrough? This tension between monopolistic control that stifles progress and legitimate protection that rewards innovation remains unresolved a century later. The story's irony is that Harvey, forced outside the patent system, created superior alternatives that might otherwise never have existed. Sometimes the greatest innovation happens not because of the system, but despite it. 1906 marked a turning point for Firestone. With Ford as their largest customer, sales hit the $1 million mark. But as always, success brought complications. Despite this milestone, profits actually declined slightly from the previous year, and shareholders who had patiently waited began demanding dividends. Harvey was left with a choice between satisfying investors in the short term or reinvesting for the long term. He crafted a careful compromise, issuing $100,000 in additional stock and declaring modest dividends that preserved cash while placating early investors. This balancing act revealed Harvey's fundamental philosophy about ownership. I then and always have regarded the stock of our company as something to buy and hold and not something to speculate in. The moment that officers or directors of a company begin to speculate in its stock, the ruin of the company is not far away, for it is impossible to serve both the company and the stock market. As the industry matured, Harvey observed a subtle but profound shift. Fewer people were in the automobile game and more in the automobile business. What had started as a novelty for enthusiasts was becoming an essential tool of modern life, driven largely by Ford's increasingly affordable models. But tire manufacturing remained surprisingly primitive. It was still more art than science. No company could guarantee specific mileage because none had mastered consistent quality. Production relied on rule-of-thumb methods rather than scientific principles. Even the raw materials were wildly inconsistent, with rubber from Brazil varying dramatically between shipments. Harvey realized that to grow beyond their current position, Firestone needed to transform tire making from craft to science. This meant establishing something most smaller manufacturers considered a luxury, a laboratory. I did not know how really important a laboratory was, he admitted, and already having 4 or 5 places for every dollar that came in, I had no inclination to look for new ways of spending money. Nevertheless, he started modestly, partitioning off a small section of the shop floor. This humble beginning opened Harvey's eyes to what science in manufacturing means, and the lab gradually evolved into a powerful technical center. Years later, he would declare, "I would almost as soon try to make tires without rubber as to try to make them without a chemist." The pattern continued when another industry cartel, the United Rim Company, refused to work with Firestone. Rather than capitulating, Harvey launched his own rim manufacturing division. When denied access to established groups, he consistently created alternatives that proved superior. "I wanted to keep out of all price fixing or royalty combinations," he explained. "They did not impress me as being good business." Was this moral stance genuine or merely the rationalization of an outsider? The evidence suggests both Harvey and Henry Ford shared a fundamental business philosophy: high volume at low prices. Their vision of making automobiles available to everyone through mass production wasn't just rhetoric, it shaped their operational decisions daily. Far from resenting his exclusion from industry cartels, Harvey had discovered that constraints often revealed opportunities invisible to insiders. Being forced outside standard practices repeatedly led him to innovations that ultimately proved superior to existing methods. What's instructive here is counterintuitive. While we all want to be welcome into the established order, often being shunned from it forces you to find another, better way. This ability to adapt and turn constraints into advantages would soon be tested on a much larger scale. Firestone had developed a philosophy on business planning that balanced preparation with flexibility. He said, "The biggest thing in business is to be working and planning ahead for production, for sales, for new developments in the art, for money, for sources of supply." Yet he also recognized the danger of rigidity. A too rigid plan may be worse than no plan at all. This balanced approach would soon face its ultimate test. In 1907, just as Firestone was experiencing tremendous growth, the Knickerbocker Trust Company in New York suddenly failed, triggering a financial panic that spread like wildfire. Harvey was in New York when the crisis erupted. He immediately telephoned the factory to halt all operations until he could assess the situation. The financial world transformed overnight as money vanished all at once, and clearinghouse certificates had to take the place of currency. When he approached his bank for additional credit against his established $60,000 line, they not only refused, but they demanded he reduce his $20,000 note by at least $5,000 when it came due in November. At that moment, with the entire financial system seizing up, most companies either froze in panic or desperately sought concessions. Harvey took a different approach. When a carload of rubber arrived in Akron with payment due, he simply told the truth to his supplier. He couldn't pay immediately. The response revealed how universal the crisis was. Unload it and use it and pay for it when you can. We're all in the same boat. Then came the defining moment. When his banknote came due, Firestone didn't just reduce it as requested, he paid it in full and immediately closed his account. It was a bold statement of independence from a bank that had shown little faith during difficult times. Firestone understood a key lesson. A good partner reveals themselves more in the bad times than the good times. The panic subsided almost as quickly as it erupted. And as Harvey noted with characteristic understatement, it left us in better condition than we ever were. By 1910, sales had soared to $5 million, with profits exceeding $1.3 million. What's instructive here is how Firestone positioned himself before the crisis struck. He wasn't predicting how the future would play out. He was just positioning for multiple possible futures. While others scrambled for survival during the panic, Harvey had maintained sufficient reserves to not only weather the storm, but capitalize on it. His father's lesson about keeping a surplus proved crucial once again. Positioning is leverage. When everyone else is desperate, the person with options holds all the power. As John D. Rockefeller said, the best feed during the depressions. By 1910, Firestone Tire Company had exploded from 12 employees to 1,000 in just 8 years. This growth created a management challenge that forced Harvey to confront a fundamental question. How could he maintain control without becoming a bottleneck? The business, he wrote, was already too large for me to look after alone, and yet I did not believe, and I never have believed in what's called delegation, he reflected. His leadership philosophy was refreshingly direct. If anything in the business is wrong, the fault is squarely with management. The fault is mine. That is my conception of business. This is the OG founder's mode. Harvey's management style remained stubbornly focused on simplicity. He tackled one task at a time and avoided hasty decisions. Rather than writing memos, he called people directly or spoke to them by phone, noting that the writing of letters can be a great time waster. One can only imagine what he'd say about today's email culture. Even his approach to financial planning resisted unnecessary complexity. While maintaining an official 12-month budget for the board, he recognized its limitations. If it were possible to plan for a year ahead, then there would be no need for judgment or management. Any question that came up could be settled by referring to the plan. Instead, he operated on a 4-month cycle that aligned with rubber purchasing periods. This skepticism towards rigid planning reflected his deeper desire to separate fact from fiction. I want to know when I am guessing and when I'm dealing with facts. But Harvey's most transformative contribution came from ruthlessly applying two deceptively simple questions to every operation. Is it necessary, and can it be simplified? These questions revealed that many established practices were merely traditions masquerading as requirements. Consider the industry-wide belief that rubber required lengthy aging in warehouses before use. When Harvey questioned this expensive and time-consuming practice, no one could explain why it was necessary. He suggested bypassing it as an experiment. The results, the unaged tires, performed just as well, saving the company millions of dollars. Someone back in the past must have laid down the rule that rubber had to age, he observed, and everyone else had followed it without question. This relentless questioning transformed operations throughout the company. Manufacturing turnover dropped from 60 to 15 days. Defects plummeted while output increased, all while using less factory space. As the company expanded nationally, Harvey initially appointed independent distributors with exclusive territories. But by 1913, he realized many distributors lacked his and Ford's vision for the automotive future. Therefore, he slashed the network and established company-owned branches to directly control both product and service. The growth eventually led to what seemed like an inevitable milestone, the National Sales Convention. At the time of our first convention, he wrote, we could not afford to spend that money, but also we thought we could not afford not to have a convention, else our men in the field might think we were not worth working for. The first modest gathering of 20 people proved genuinely valuable. Distributors witnessed tire manufacturing firsthand and met the leadership team. But success bred excess. One successful convention spawned specialized events for every type of employee, with elaborate productions, photographers, fancy booklets, and what Harvey called manufactured enthusiasm. This organizational bloat reached its absurd peak with Milestones, a legitimate general interest magazine featuring famous writers and expensive cover art. Though it cost 20 cents per copy to produce, dealers bought it for 5 cents, and circulation reached 1 million copies. As Harley dryly noted, as advertising, it was worth to us exactly nothing. The wake-up call came when Harvey discovered salespeople boasting about selling marketing materials rather than tires. Upon learning a whole department existed solely to bill advertising materials, he asked the crucial question, are we in the business of selling tires or are we publishers and sellers of advertising? He answered by immediately killing both the magazine and the entire advertising billing department, refocusing the sales team on the core mission, selling tires. What's instructive here is how growth naturally creates complexity that quietly erodes focus and takes on a life of its own. Even with a leader as vigilant as Harvey, organizational bloat crept in, convention upon convention, departments upon departments, costs upon costs, all seemingly reasonable in isolation, but collectively diverting resources from the core business. Nobody can maintain the focus of a company like its CEO, especially the founder. The remedy wasn't more sophisticated systems or additional oversight, but rather returning to the foundational questions. Is it necessary? Can it be simplified? These questions cut through the organizational inertia that transforms successful companies into bureaucratic zombies. The greatest advantage often comes from not working harder within complexity, but from the clarity to recognize and eliminate it. Remember, simplicity scales, fancy fails. As World War I approached, the Firestone Tire Company was expanding rapidly. Their factories nearly tripled in size within 5 years, including a facility dedicated exclusively to producing a single tire size, an early application of Harvey's simplification philosophy that mirrored Ford's own manufacturing focus. When America entered World War I in 1917, production priorities shifted dramatically. Nearly all output diverted to government contracts, manufacturing tires for military vehicles and trucks. But this wartime pressure revealed an opportunity that would transform American transportation forever. Before the war, Harvey wrote, comparatively few automobiles were used for business, and the truck had not established itself as an economical form of transportation. Long hauls by trucks were unknown, excepting as stunts. The war changed all that. The war was fought with trucks. While most saw only wartime disruption, Harvey spotted a solution to a critical infrastructure problem. America's railroads had become hopelessly bottlenecked with military shipments, threatening to strangle the domestic economy. In 1918, with the railroads clogged with government freight, I started the ship-by-truck movement, Harvey explained. His insight was simple but revolutionary. Trucks could complement rail service perfectly. Railroads excelled at moving large volumes over long distances, but trucks offered superior flexibility for shorter hauls where loading, unloading, and switching rail cars wasted precious time. Picture America's transportation system in 1918. A nation built around railroads suddenly found its arteries clogged during wartime. The economy needed an alternative, and Harvey provided it through a campaign that was both visionary and pragmatic. Firestone trucks, emblazoned with ship-by-truck Firestone banners, toured the country as moving billboards. Harvey authored influential articles declaring ship-by-truck as the traffic motto of today and the future. He established ship-by-truck clubs among freight operators nationwide and created early freight brokerages that connected shippers with truck owners looking for loads. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Henry Ford had just introduced the Model T in 1917, America's first mass-produced one-ton truck. As Harvey drummed up demand for trucking services, Ford supplied affordable vehicles, many riding on Firestone tires. Their complementary visions created a multiplier effect that transformed American logistics. Registered trucks in the United States soared from 215,000 in 1916 to over 1 million by 1920. What's instructive is how Harvey consistently positioned himself at the intersection of major trends. Rather than just selling tires, he created entire ecosystems that expanded his market. The ship-by-truck movement wasn't merely clever marketing, it was infrastructure development that benefited both the nation and Firestone's bottom line. By catching the right wave of transportation evolution, Harvey transformed his company from a mere supplier into an essential catalyst for America's economic modernization. Then came the boom, the biggest boom the country has ever known, Firestone recalled, although keep in mind these words were written in the mid-1920s. During 1919, we produced more than 4 million tires and made a profit of more than $9 million. We could not keep up with demand. The railroads remained congested and dealers were willing to pay premiums simply to secure deliveries. Prices did not matter, he noted. Delivery was the thing. Success masked a dangerous delusion. Firestone's Akron headquarters sprouted an elaborate hierarchy, east, west, and south divisions, each with their own managers, sub-managers, and accounting departments. This complexity multiplied at every branch as each location developed mini empires of specialized assistants. The sales force ballooned to 1,000 people while paperwork multiplied even faster. Years later, Harvey was refreshingly honest about this period. I do not know where this organization bug came from, but like the flu, it hit nearly everyone in the country. I am free to confess what it did to us, for it is over with and we are immune. Here's the dangerous part. All this organizational bloat seemed to be working. Sales kept growing. Therefore, everyone assumed their elaborate systems were brilliant and necessary. Harvey later realized they would have shown as startling an increase had we abolished our whole sales force, closed all our branches and dealers, and just sent out our tires and freight cars to be thrown off on sidings and taken away by clamoring buyers. They were succeeding despite their organization, not because of it. The post-war boom had papered over fundamental inefficiencies that would soon be brutally exposed. The prosperity of 1919 bred dangerous complacency. As Harvey observed, in 1919 to 1920, the presidents and other high officers of companies began to get the idea that they needed rest and recreation and plenty of it. An executive felt embarrassed if discovered within 1,000 miles of his job, for of course a good executive always delegated his duties. Harvey had rented a house in England for summer 1920, but something was nagging at him. Despite record profits and insatiable demand, he sensed the boom couldn't last. In May, at business's peak, he gathered 800 foremen at his family farm with a prescient warning, be prepared to slow down. Then he sailed for Europe anyway. By this time, Firestone had accumulated massive financial exposure, $35 million in borrowed money and unprecedented long-term contracts for raw materials. The word had gone around in the tire industry that the man who could get fabric would get the business, Harvey explained. We had never made long contracts ahead for fabric, but that year we made several 3-year contracts, and of course at high prices. Everything was at high prices. Sales held strong through June, but July brought the first cracks. Inventory began accumulating while Harvey received increasingly urgent cables from Europe. Sales were slowing, factories ran at full capacity, contracted materials kept arriving, and cash was evaporating. Initially, Harvey stayed put, reasoning, it would be a good thing to have a little vacation before confronting the inevitable crisis, but a final desperate cable forced his hand. Sales had stopped completely. Borrowing capacity was exhausted, and bills were coming due with no means to pay them. Harvey cut short his vacation and took the next steamer home. Company officers met him at the dock with what he described as doleful faces. Over lunch, they painted a grim picture. $43 million in debt, no willing banks, factories producing tires nobody wanted, and contracted materials arriving they couldn't pay for. The executives saw no way forward. It was over, or so they thought. Arriving in Akron on Friday morning, Harvey surveyed the crisis and made a characteristic decision. I will not tackle this job until Monday. He retreated to his family homestead for solitary reflection. By Saturday, his mind was clear. He summoned the assistant sales manager to arrange Monday meetings with key sales personnel. Their reports were unanimous. There is no business. The dealers are not only stocked, but also demoralized and will not buy. Without hesitation, Harvey took direct control, telling the sales manager to take a vacation while he personally ran the department. Here's where most executives would have panicked, but Harvey found the crisis energizing. The situation did not frighten me. It put new life into me. I saw the opportunity to do more business than we had ever done. His diagnosis was simple. The public still needed tires, but they are not going to buy at present prices. His solution shocked everyone, slashed prices by 25% across the board. We are in the business of making and selling tires. The factory here is piled to the roof with unsold tires. All the branches are full of tires, and so are all your dealers. Our tires have to be turned into cash. His sales team couldn't comprehend such drastic action. Some argued for modest 10 to 15% reductions. Harvey stood firm, not revealing he'd actually considered cutting prices by 33 1/3%. A small reduction would not give the smash we had to have, the big dramatic play. Those who couldn't embrace the strategy had to be let out. This was no time for half-hearted work. Implementation matched the strategy's boldness. Harvey personally addressed dealer meetings nationwide. The company bought full-page newspaper ads and hung enormous red banners proclaiming Firestone Tire's 25% discount on dealer shops across America. It was a fire sale for the first time in our history. We thrust aside all our dignity and customs. We plastered the country with our slogan. Competitors initially held their prices, giving Firestone crucial market exclusivity. Our competitors fought us for about a month, as I thought they would. Then they trailed after us with cuts, but I only needed that month's start. The gamble worked brilliantly. In September and October 1920 alone, Firestone sold $18 million worth of tires and reduced debt from nearly $44 million to just over $31 million. What's instructive here is Harvey's counterintuitive response to the crisis. While his executives saw only disaster, he recognized opportunity disguised as catastrophe. Most leaders facing such circumstances either freeze in analysis paralysis or make incremental adjustments that preserve dignity but fail to match the problem's magnitude. Harvey chose the third path. Dramatic action that seemed reckless but was actually precisely calibrated to market conditions. His willingness to thrust aside dignity and act decisively when competitors hesitated created the opening he needed. Sometimes the best strategy isn't the most sophisticated one. It's the one bold enough to cut through the noise and force immediate market response. The other thing that's interesting here to me is that he got rid of people who were only half-hearted. He put the sales manager on vacation and took his job, removed salespeople that wouldn't get on board. As he said, it was no time for half-hearted work. The bold price cuts were just the beginning. The crisis forced Harvey to confront the organizational bloat that had metastasized during the boom years, and he responded with surgical precision. The advertising department slashed from 105 people to 7. The elaborate divisional structure completely scrapped, with all branches now reporting directly to Harvey. Each location was stripped to its essentials, just a sales manager and office manager, with the sales manager expected to actively sell rather than supervise. For every position, Harvey asked one brutal question. Can we get along without this job? By 1921, the sales force had been cut by 75%. Those who remained faced intense pressure and lower salaries. He was deliberately filtering for people who could stand the gaff, and these were the only men we wanted. Manufacturing had spawned similar excesses. Vice presidents, department heads, and multiple management layers generating an avalanche of memos, reports, and meetings. Harvey later recalled with dark humor, "We wrote so many notes that the vice presidents and their assistants often used to get a day or two behind in the reading of them, and we had to devise a bright red interoffice telegram for really urgent business." The crisis prompted radical simplification. The charts went out the window. We abolished offices and departments. We called for all the forms that were in use. The statistics department shrank from 35 people to 3 while maintaining access to essential information. The office force dropped from 1,000 to 800. Recovery proved slow and painful. Profits for 1921 totaled less than $1 million. But through relentless discipline, Harvey achieved what had seemed impossible. By October 31st, 1924, the company did not owe $1 to any bank. Reflecting on this period, Harvey distilled the experience into enduring wisdom. By hammering on economies, by pressing sales and qualities, and by never fooling ourselves as to where we stood, we had wiped out an indebtedness which at one time was thought to be crushing. What's instructive here is how the crisis revealed what was actually necessary versus what merely felt important during prosperous times. When survival was at stake, Harvey discovered that most of the organizational complexity they'd built was theater. Impressive looking, but fundamentally useless. As I like to say, simple scales and fancy fails. Elaborate systems often collapse under pressure, while simple, focused operations prove anti-fragile. Sometimes you need a crisis to show you what really matters. Success sows the seeds of its own destruction. Harvey's autobiography ends in the mid-1920s with a fascinating reflection on why he kept working despite having already made his fortune. There's a notion, he wrote, that if a man has established a business and accumulated a certain competence and then keeps on working, it is only because he is greedy and wants more and more money, and that eventually he just becomes a slave to money. Harvey completely rejected this view. After 25 years of building his company, he had no plans to stop. He didn't care whether he was the slave or the master of that business because, as he wrote, the job is worth doing as either master or servant. This mindset explains why Harvey handled the 1920 crisis so differently from his panicked executives. The bold 25% price cut reflected his genuine belief that challenges make businesses worthwhile. As he put it, the very worries and insistent demands on one's mentality and physique are a joy, for they are tests and challenges. This reminds me of Brad Jacobs and his mentor and the conversation they had around problems. Our business is just a series of problems. They're just opportunities. You better get used to it. For Harvey, business wasn't a game to be won or a science to be mastered. It was something more fundamental. You couldn't build it and walk away because no business will run itself. That's why he demolished elaborate management structures the moment they stopped serving their purpose. Money mattered, certainly, but his actions revealed deeper motivations. When he personally took over sales during the crisis, slashed prices, and cut organizational fat, he was fighting for something beyond wealth. He was fighting for the work itself. He maintained a practical view of profits, deliberately causing a business to operate without profits through some foggy concept of benevolence is only another way of destroying the service of that business. This clear-eyed approach helped him navigate both boom and bust with equal effectiveness. What's instructive here is Harvey's understanding that meaningful work provides its own compensation beyond money. People need to be a part of something larger than themselves and find genuine satisfaction in solving problems, building systems, and creating value. It turns out these remain engaging regardless of financial position. The best founders aren't motivated by money, but rather the reward of building something that matters with the people they love. Beyond balance sheets and profit margins, Harvey was driven by something deeper, business as a school of experience that provided unparalleled opportunities for growth. What truly satisfied him was the greatest pleasure is in doing something to help others to help themselves, not through charity, but through genuine opportunities for independence. His ship-by-truck movement exemplified this philosophy, opening doors for countless entrepreneurs in trucking and transportation. Even during brutal cost-cutting, he was fighting to save the company that provided thousands of livelihoods. "I like people," Harvey wrote, "and business brings one in close contact with a never-ending stream of people." This human connection shaped his leadership style, personally hitting the road during crisis instead of hiding beneath memos and management layers. What ultimately sustained Harvey was the supreme satisfaction of accomplishment, of planning to do something and carrying through those plans against all obstacles to a final accomplishment. The obstacles had been formidable, launching against established competitors, pivoting from carriage to automobile to tires, pioneering truck tires, surviving financial booms and collapses, and building an international enterprise. Harvey stepped down as president in 1932, turning over operations to his son while remaining chairman until his death in 1938. By then, the company he'd started with 12 employees commanded 25% of the entire U.S. tire market, with sales exceeding $156 million. Beyond business success, Harvey became legendary for his friendships with Henry Ford and Thomas Edison. Their famous vagabonds camping trips captured America's imagination, symbolizing the nation's transformation into the automobile age. After Harvey's death, Firestone remained in family hands for decades, playing a crucial role during World War II and expanding globally through the post-war boom. Though Bridgestone acquired the company in 1988, the Firestone brand endures today. Harvey's core business philosophy remains strikingly relevant. Capital isn't that important in business. Experience isn't that important. You can get both. What is important is ideas. I would add, and determination and persistence and all the things that we talk about on the Outlier series. His emphasis on innovation over resources, people over systems, and integrity as the keystone of business continues resonating today. What's most instructive about Harvey's legacy isn't the size of the empire he built, but how he built it. Through relentless questioning of assumptions, maintaining financial discipline during both boom and bust, and never losing sight of the human element in business. He proved that sustainable success comes from not following industry conventions, but from having the courage to find better ways when established paths don't serve your vision. His story reminds us all that the most powerful competitive advantage often lies not in what you know, but in your willingness to challenge what everyone else assumes to be true. Okay, let's dive into the reflections and afterthoughts. And I have a few comments before we get to the lessons that we can take away from Harvey. Well, what an amazing entrepreneur he was. What a force. I first came across the book Men and Rubber, I think it was about 10 years ago. And I picked it up just randomly at a bookstore, and I was so surprised by the amount of wisdom in this book that I started buying copies for all my friends. And at one point, I think I probably owned about 5 or 10% of the inventory in this book. You could only get it used, and it was becoming increasingly hard to find. So I wanted to make this book easier for everyone to get their hands on, so we republished it. You can go on Amazon now and look up Men and Rubber, Harvey Firestone, and you can get a copy in hardcover, in softcover, Audible, and in Kindle. And we wanted that because we just wanted everybody in the world to have access to this information. So I hope you enjoy the book. So there's an interesting anecdote in the book about Henry Ford that I think is worth highlighting, and I'm going to read you a direct excerpt here. It's commonly imagined that Mr. Ford arrives at his decisions quickly. Nothing could be farther from the fact. He reaches his decisions slowly and alone. He does not jump at anything. And so when the time comes for execution, everything moves with marvelous rapidity because everything has been previously thought through and planned. He has had the time to do this thinking and planning because he has used his time himself instead of permitting others to use it for him. And he is certain that plans will be executed for him because he knows how to let men go when they grow too rich and lazy to execute. There's a lot of wisdom in that. And the two most profound sort of lessons in that excerpt are, one, thinking through things slowly and taking control of your time. And the second is a bit ruthless, but obvious too, which is you need to learn to let people go when they, and quote unquote, become too rich and lazy to execute. And I think that's really interesting, especially in the time that we're in today of unparalleled AI transition. And a lot of people are going to struggle because the easy parts of your job no longer exist. Another excerpt from the book that I wanted to work in and I think highlights a valuable lesson, but I couldn't find a really good way to do it was, I'm going to read you the excerpt. Quick decisions that have not behind them a long train of thought are exceedingly dangerous. Personally, I do not want to have around me the kind of man who can give me an instant decision on anything that I may bring up. For if he has not had the opportunity to give the question serious thought, then he is only guessing, and I can do my own guessing. And that excerpt, a couple things I want to point out there. One, I like that. He wanted to be surrounded by people who have thought. The second thing I want to say is the book was published in 1926. So keep that in mind with some of these excerpts. The language about men, there's some other a little bit scandalous language in the book itself, but for the time, it was sort of in line. And I didn't make any effort to edit any of that when we republished it. The other thing I want to point out just before we get to the lessons is that parts of this episode are entirely read by AI, an AI version of me. And I'm playing around with AI a lot, and I'm so curious. It allows me to do things that I can't otherwise do. And I'm wondering, what you think of that. If you actually identified the paragraphs or sections that are AI-based, send me an email. and hopefully you like it. It allows me to do more and scale better, and I'm going to increasingly play around with it. And Okay, let's dive into the lessons here. So Harvey was a force. This book is packed with wisdom. I got 14 lessons as I was rereading this book and doing this episode. So the first is a taste for salt water. Most people quit when things get uncomfortable. Harvey thrived on challenges. When faced with a $43 million debt crisis in 1920, he said, "The situation did not frighten me. It put new life into me." While his executives panicked, he saw opportunity. Excellence isn't about avoiding difficulty. It's about developing a perverse appreciation for discomfort that reveals who you really are. 2, obsess over inputs. Harvey's father taught him that a fine crop one year was more or less a fortunate accident. Instead of chasing results, Harvey focused on controlling what he could, maintaining surplus inventory, questioning every process, and building systematic advantages. Results are lagging indicators. The only thing you can control is the process. 3, high agency. When industry cartels repeatedly excluded Harvey from tire associations and rim companies, he didn't just accept defeat, he created superior alternatives. There is always a better way of doing everything than the way which is standard at the moment. It is a good thing for a man to be pushed into finding that better way. High agency means treating every no as research, not rejection. Create what you're denied access to. 4, the courage to close doors. Harvey could have stayed in the profitable solid tire business, but recognized that solid tires would soon be a minor product long before that was conventional wisdom. Despite the internal resistance that was so strong that he had to buy out a major shareholder, he pivoted to the tires we know today. Sometimes you have to kill good options to pursue great ones. Bias toward action. When the 1920 crisis hit, Harvey didn't form committees or hire consultants. He took the next steamer home, personally ran sales, and implemented a 25% cut within days. A small reduction would not give the smash we had to have, the big dramatic play. Speed beats perfection when conditions demand decisive action. 6, find the lever. Rather than competing directly with established tire companies, Harvey solved the industry's inventory nightmare with roll tires that dealers could cut to size. This innovation took us completely out of competition by eliminating the constraint that everyone else just accepted as permanent. 7, outthink, don't just outwork. Harvey's 2 questions, is it necessary and can it be simplified, transformed operations throughout Firestone. When he questioned the industry belief that rubber needed aging, nobody could explain why. Eliminating this unnecessary step saved millions. The greatest advantage often comes not from working harder within complexity, but finding the clarity to recognize and eliminating it. 8, bounce, don't break. Every rejection became Harvey's competitive advantage. Excluded from the Clincher Tire Association, he developed straight-sided tires. Refused by the rim company, he started his own manufacturing. Each setback revealed opportunities invisible to insiders. 9, positioning is leverage. Harvey's father taught him that a surplus was the greatest aid to business judgment and the key to being master of your own circumstances. Harvey applied this principle during the 1907 panic, maintaining reserves and a margin of safety. While his competitors scrambled to save their businesses, Harvey aggressively expanded. 10, win by not losing. Harvey avoided the 2 obvious responses to competitive pressure, cutting quality or cutting prices without operational changes. Instead, he innovated his way out of the trap. Success often comes not from brilliance, but from disciplined avoidance of stupidity. As I like to say, avoiding stupidity is easier than seeking brilliance. 11, always be unforced. Harvey refused to make decisions from weakness. During the 1920s crisis, he told his team, "I will not tackle this job until Monday," and retreated to think clearly. Even under extreme pressure, he acted from choice, not from panic. Only move when you choose to. 12, Never delegate core responsibilities. While Firestone grew his company to thousands of employees, he maintained personal control over critical functions. During crisis, he didn't rely on managers, but took direct command of sales. His philosophy was clear. If anything in the business is wrong, the fault is squarely with management. The fault is mine. True leadership means accepting ultimate responsibility. 13. Simple scales, fancy fails. During the boom, Firestone developed elaborate hierarchies, specialized conventions, and even published a 1 million circulation magazine. The crisis revealed this was all theater. Harvey's 2 questions, is it necessary and can it be simplified, cut through organizational bloat that transforms successful companies into bureaucratic zombies. And finally, 14, catch the right wave. Harvey positioned himself at the intersection of major trends, the shift to automobiles, the rise of trucking, the need for transportation alternatives during World War I. Rather than predicting the future, he positioned himself for multiple possible futures and rode the waves that materialized. I hope you learned as much as I did through listening to this episode. This man was a fascinating guy, and I appreciate you listening to the Outliers series. Thanks for listening and learning with us, and be sure to sign up for my free weekly newsletter at fs.blog/newsletter. I hope you enjoyed my reflections at the end of this episode. That's normally reserved for members, but with this Outlier series, I wanted to make them available to everyone. The Farnham Street website is where you can get more info on our membership program, which includes access to episode transcripts, reflections for all episodes, my updated repository featuring highlights from the books used in this series, and more. Plus, be sure to follow myself and Farnham Street on X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you like what we're doing here, leaving a rating and review would mean the world. And if you really like us, sharing with a friend is the best way to grow this special series. Until next time.